All right, welcome back to the channel. I'm here to go over the top 8 deck list from the first RBET of the year. So this is season 2. It was hosted by Keegan at E3 Yu-Gi-Oh! Fantastic event. I'm glad that it actually got pushed back a week, despite the fact that the reason it got pushed back wasn't the most positive thing. I think Challenge, the website that is typically used to do the brackets, Challenge, however you say it, that website did not function well the week prior. But that actually worked out for a lot of people. Apparently, there was like a 50% increase in entrants from the week that it was supposed to be to the week that it actually occurred, which was the weekend of March 4th and 5th. So I think that's a positive for everyone. I think that's a win. A win is a win. And yeah, it worked out. There was a PS5 tournament the week before. A lot of people couldn't enter, including myself. And then because it got pushed back, a lot more people seemed to. It just was a better weekend for everyone. So that's great, and I'm happy that that happened. Also, I took these deck lists directly from Keegan's video. They're not up on anywhere else as of right now. So yeah, this information came directly from his channel at E3 Yu-Gi-Oh! So check him out, subscribe to him. I believe that he just reached 8,000 subscribers today. But yeah, I really love the RBET tournaments. I like the Deck Devastators tournaments, Peak of the Beak, all of them. I like every single Edison tournament that's being run. Oh, also, before we completely get into me discussing these decks, I want to say that I got a notification in Discord the other day that there is going to be a 3v3 Edison tournament on Dueling Book coming up soon. It's being hosted, I believe, in Format Library. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where I got the notification from. But yeah, there's going to be a 3v3 Edison tournament coming up. I think it's March 25th. So that's kind of huge. I think it's the first one of that type of thing. And it being on Dueling Book is interesting as well. So yeah, if you can find 2 other people, definitely play in that. It should be a lot of fun. And yeah, let's keep making Edison one of the most popular formats for Yu-Gi-Oh! Okay. So the first deck list is going to be top 8, and it was a guy named Dave. I'm not sure if that is just his Dueling Book name or his actual name or both, but the name given in the video was just Dave, so I'm going to call him Dave. Anyways, it's a Dark Hero deck. I've actually played against this a lot at my locals. There's a guy at my local who likes to play Dark Hero. His name is Jake. Just shout out to Jake Savage. I've played against the deck so much that I have really good experience against it, and this build looks very similar to what I'm used to. Yeah, the deck is scary. And the reason why it's scary is because Dark Calling is a hell of a card. It literally is Miracle Fusion. You banish monsters listed on a fusion monster from your hand and or graveyard. So in some ways it's actually better than Miracle Fusion because you can do it from your hand and or graveyard as opposed to like your field and or graveyard. So yeah, this card is scary because of what it summons though. That's the main thing that always freaks me out when I see this card being activated is because the monster that comes out typically is Dark Gaia and it gets the attack power of the 2 monsters used to make it. So it's always going to be well over 4,000 attack. And that's just way too much attack to take directly. Edison format is definitely a life point based format. It's the reason why Black Wings is one of the better decks, and definitely, in my opinion, the best deck because it does damage better than any other deck in the format. So I'm not surprised that another damage-based deck featuring a card like Stratos, which is one of the best cards in the format as well, would do well in the Edison format. This is a deck that I would consider A tier. I think anything playing Stratos and E-Calls and Rhoda and stuff like that, it's going to be a good deck no matter how you look at it, right? Like these decks can always not only top, but I think they can also just win a tournament on any given day. Stratos is such a good card, and he kind of facilitates everything else that every deck wants to do that plays him. Future Fusion is also amazing. This deck also plays Miracle Fusion. I don't even need to tell you that Miracle Fusion is great. 1 Ocean, 1 Snowman Eater just to kind of slow down some aggression. I like the main deck Jujutsu Masters because if you're expecting fairies, Black Wings, Glad Beast maybe, since Sean McCabe just kind of shook up the meta with that new Glad Beast deck that he made last week for the PS5 tournament. A lot of that was on DB prior to this RBET. So I'm sure people were thinking about Glad Beast going into this, and Legendary Jiu-Jitsu Master shits on that deck. And you also have other really cool cards like, was it Big Piece Golem, just a 2100 monster that is really hard for something like Glad Beast to deal with, and you just kind of have to play it anyway in his deck because of Prisma and its synergy being rock and everything. And then you have Quagmire, the rock one that's like 1900 and has an optional Doom Caliber Knight effect. So Doom Caliber Knight is shit because it just kills itself as soon as literally anything activate. So a Treeborn Frog, a Light Sworn, or just someone activating Quick Draw from their hand. Like so many things just activate on Doom Caliber Value. One of the worst things that can happen is your opponent just has a Value in the grave and they just go activate Value, and then Doom Caliber is forced to kill itself, and then the Value just can activate again. Just kind of like the same thing with Royal Oppression. So yeah, this guy is much better that it's optional that you can negate a monster effect. I really like that card, and I'm glad that it's seeing play. Faustina, obviously one of the best rock monsters in the format, and being able to main deck it is a huge boon to any deck that can. And Grammel is a really good card if you have tempo, or if you're going for no TK and your opponent's trying to wall up. So that has natural synergy with Dark Calling, because you summon a monster that's like 4,000 plus attack, and then you summon Grammel as your normal summon, and you bounce up whatever they're trying to defend themselves with, whether that be a Ryko or Hamster or whatever, and then you get in for a crap ton of damage. It's really, really good. And yeah, the rest of this deck, I think, is, you know, just traps to defend itself. And then we go into the side deck, and it has Super Poly is the only thing that I don't usually see sided in Edison format, but it makes sense that a hero deck will want to side Super Poly, because if you play against frogs, or if you play a mirror match of any kind of other hero deck, Super Poly, I imagine, is pretty decent. Yeah, it can take water monsters to make your own Absolute Zero. It could take earth monsters to make your Gaia. And yeah, so that's pretty big. That is a pretty big deal. I think that the rest of the side deck and everything else in the extra deck these are pretty standard cards that you expect to see, like in any deck playing Prisma heroes and, you know, this type of engine. Okay, next up is another top 8 deck from somebody by the name of Giorgione. I think that's how you say it, not 100% sure, so if I butcher your name, forgive me. But this is a hero beat deck, very standard hero beat deck, I would say, featuring, you know, triple Gemini Spark, triple Alias, triple Miracle Fusion, and then you have no Diva. So there's like 2 versions of it, I would say, and one of them plays Diva, one of them doesn't. This one doesn't, obviously. This one is opting to play double Ocean and double Snowman Eater as a way to facilitate its Miracle Fusions. And yeah, 1 copy DD Warrior Lady, 1 copy of Thunder King Ryo. That does seem a little weird to me, just 1 copy of both of those cards. I would want to commit to one of them over the other, but for what it's worth, DD Warrior Lady and Thunder King are both fantastic cards. And yeah, this deck is playing Upstart Goblin, just 2 of it, 1 Dark Brob. I would probably cut that Dark Brob for another Upstart Goblin, if I'm being honest. I don't really think that you need the Dark Brob if you're not playing Skill Drain and Oppression. You're already playing Starlight Road. I would even play a second Starlight Road before I played the Dark Brob, just because you're not protecting Floodgates specifically. That is like the thing that I think about when I think of why Dark Brob is ever going to be played. It's definitely to protect the card that just auto wins the game, and there aren't any cards in this deck that I feel like are auto-win cards like Oppression and Skill Drain are. So yeah, outside of that, just 2 copies of Hero Blast. I'm actually not mad at that, because Hero Blast is one of the cards that does contribute to you bricking. Like when this deck does lose, or when any deck playing the Hero Beat style loses the game, it's because they just have dead Gemini Sparks and Hero Blast without an access to Alias. So, you know, having 1 less Hero Blast is not going to hurt. Obviously, Gemini Spark is a cracked card. It's a spell, so it's fast. And you drawing an Alias and having like double Gemini Spark in your hand just makes your whole hand come to life, and then you're really happy. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all that he realized that Hero Blast is a card that you could cut down to 2 and it wouldn't absolutely destroy the efficiency of your deck. 1 copy of Dust Tornado. Yeah, just like a tech choice there. Mirror Force, Torrential, standard cards. I'm not really a big fan of Torrential in this kind of deck, because it is low on monsters and it's very tempo based. Like you want to have a guy on the field, like your Ocean sit on the field or your Alias sit on the field, and then you just kind of let things come at you and you deal with them that way without getting rid of your monster and keeping your very small list, because it's only 12 monsters in this deck if I'm counting this correctly. I think that there are 10 on the top and 2 on the second row. So if there's only 12 monsters in the deck, I think that Torrential is not the best. And it's always awkward when you have something like Torrential and Snowman Eater. It's always awkward when you have something like Torrential and Snowman Eater. I just hate that feeling. You know, Torrential not a big fan of. But yeah, side deck, we have Super Poly, 1 copy. So that's 2 decks in a row to have Super Poly in a side deck. I really haven't seen that card beside it again much before this event. It always kind of made sense that Super Poly would see play eventually, but it's still not as strong as it is obviously in modern Yu-Gi-Oh. We don't even have to talk about that, but I don't even think it's that good if you're playing a mirror match where both players are using Absolute Zero, because if you have to fuse using their absolute zero at any point, then whatever you bring out is just going to be destroyed. So if your opponent ever has absolute zero on the field, then it's kind of awkward because you're fusing to make a guy that either is going to die immediately because of absolute zero being sent to the graveyard on your opponent's side, or you're summoning a guy against an absolute zero that you didn't fuse away for some reason, and then like it's going to die that way. So it's, I don't know, it's very interesting seeing Super Poly, but it's only one copy in his deck. So I think that even Giorgione realized that it's not the best, but it's just something to have just in case it comes up. And Widespread Ruin, I don't think I've ever seen this card be sided or even played in Edison format until just now. This was a card that was played back in like 05 Yu-Gi-Oh, like GOAT format. When people were doing triple Sakuretsu, some people liked Widespread Ruin because it doesn't target. So if your opponent has like, you know, multiple big monsters on the field and they attack you and you widespread and they go Book of Moon one of them, it will just kill the other monster on the field with the highest attack from your opponent. So that's kind of cool that it kind of gets around Book of Moon, and it also kills things like Titanial that, you know, stops you from targeting and stuff like that. So it has some merits that it doesn't target. So yeah, there's that. And I think the rest of the side deck is really standard. I am curious about the spies in the side deck though, because I feel like Snowman Eater kind of covers the same exact thing. Like if you're siding spy, I'm not really sure what deck you're siding spy against. Like, is that? I think, okay, it's awkward because you could side spy against Black Wings theoretically, but I feel like at that point I would just side Consecrated Light in this deck. Like I would actually, not even joking, just change the spies out for Consecrated Light if that was the intent. If the intent was I want spies and Snowman Eaters, like you don't take out the snowmen and you keep them in and you put in spies, then I guess against something like Fairies that has a hard time dealing with big butts, that could be a thing. But I really am not understanding the double spy in the side deck. Yeah, I think if you want something against Black Wings, I personally think that Consecrated is just better. It's not like they're going to put in Deck Devi against you anyway, so you don't really have to. Both of them can be hit by Deck Devi regardless, like Consecrated and Spy. So I don't really think that's an issue. I'm still trying to rack my brain like quickly as I'm doing this about why you would want to play Spy in the side deck. Like what decks would Spy be good against that you would need it for? And if the answer is just Blackwing, then I would rather just have Consecrated Light because you don't play any Dark Monsters. So Consecrated doesn't hurt you literally at all. But yeah, all right, let's move on. Okay, next up we have Feng Shui making top 8 with basically a quick draw deck, although so I hate quick draw. If you hear me talk ever on this channel about that card, you know I have a major disdain for quick draw. I'm glad that at most he's playing one copy of it because the card is really, really not good. This should have actually been on my most overrated cards in Edison list. I think that quick draw is just not it. But it apparently even Feng Shui, who topped this event, knew that that card wasn't the best, so he just played one, as most people I see playing quick draw decks sometimes crazily max out on quick draw, which is insane, or they play 2, which is the standard, or the most standard, rather. But yeah, this is interesting because he's playing Thastalos along with Caius, and I think the coolest thing is the 2 copies of Soul Exchange to go with that. So Soul Exchange is a card whose stock has gone up in this tournament. I see multiple decks actually playing it now, and they're not just Monarch decks, which is the super interesting part about it. Usually you just see this card played in actual Frogs or Monarchs or whatever, but this deck is just using it as a way to burst out Monarchs. And Thastalos, I'm a big fan. He's actually my second favorite Monarch, honestly, because you don't need your opponent to commit anything to the field for Thastalos to apply pressure and also get advantage. So it does both of the things that Monarchs are meant to do. But most people, when they play against a Monarch deck, when they know you're on Monarchs, they try to not commit too much to the field because then your Monarchs don't do shit. And this deck is like, well, if you don't commit to the field, I'm going to rip a card from your hand and start attacking you for 2,400. And so you need to start playing, and then that plays into the Caiuses and the Debris Dragon into Black Rose and all that stuff. So it's really cool that Thastalos was thought about here as a way to make your opponent commit. And it combos fantastically with Hamster and Raiko and all that stuff. So you like, you know, flip up Raiko. In this case, I would say instead of popping back row, then tribute summon Caius and banish monster, you can go flip, pop your monster, and then tribute for Thastalos, rip a card out your hand, then attack and hopefully use a back row on it. And now you've taken a trap, a monster with the Raiko, and a card out their hand with Thastalos. And that is insane equity right there. So I've always liked that stylus for that. Also, Soul Exchange, that stylus feels really good because it's basically the same thing that I just said. You Soul Exchange, so you get rid of their monster. You summon that stylus, so you get rid of a card out of their hand. If they use something like Bottomless or Deep Prison or whatever at some point on the stylus, then you get a trap as well. So that takes away 3 of their cards for basically just 2 of yours. And yeah, it's always a pretty good exchange when that stylus is coming down. Battle Fader for defense. This deck is only running 5 traps, so not too surprising there that Battle Fader is being played here. Yeah, double Debris Dragon, double Dandelion, 1 copy of Treeborn Frog. It makes sense with all the Monarchs here. And I think the rest of this is, you know, pretty, like, I won't say necessarily standard, because this is definitely a unique take on the quick draw deck, and I think that this is more so how it should be built. I like the Compulse. I like the Enemy Controller. Both of these cards do great things with, you know, Treeborn Frog and tokens and stuff like that. Battle Fader, that has been used already. Econ is great with that. And yeah, Compulse is a really nice card. Clears extra deck monsters really easily. And then in the side deck, it's just Doom Caliber Knight is the only thing that stands out to me, really. I guess this is for other decks that want to set monsters. So if you play against another, God forbid, quick draw deck, you can summon Doom Caliber Knight and attack their face down hamster and just kind of trade 1 for 1 that way and try to take the tempo back from your opponent. I can see that being a thing. At that point, and I hate to say this, but I hate Doom Caliber Knight more than I hate Nobleman to Crossout, so I would just rather play Crossout if that was the goal. I don't even consider Doom Caliber Knight to be a real body because so many things out it in a non-pleasant way. Like, it's one of the most blatant cards that your opponent can just choose when they feel like outing it in the game. Like, at any point, they could be like, okay, I'll just give this monster to the Doom Caliber Knight. It is the least impactful monster in my hand. I don't care about this monster. I'll just let it die to Doom Caliber Knight. And I don't like that. I don't like that your opponent can blatantly choose that they want to deal with it with the worst monster that they have. I also don't like that things like DD Crow are chainable to it that will just destroy it and make DD Crow get more value than it might have gotten. Yeah, so Doom Caliber Knight, I'm not a fan of, but you know, this deck topped, and I'm curious to know what he sided against and what it was good against specifically. But yeah, everything else, DD Crows and Cyber Dragons in the side deck, Triple D Prison, I would say for, you know, like Glad Beast or Machina, decks where D Prison actually really can hurt. Surprisingly, there are no copies of Bottomless Trap Hole anywhere in this list. And, you know, with as much as Black Wings are touted as the best deck and such a problematic deck and all this other stuff, he was like, fuck that. I'm just not playing Bottomless at all. Don't need it. And clearly did not. Black Wings did not top this event, at least Pure or Hybrid did not. But Value Turbo ended up getting second. And that is like, you know, in the same sphere, but it is not literally the Black Wing deck. So it is interesting that a deck without Bottomless Trap Hole was able to make it this far, because that card is kind of like a staple in every deck that does play traps. It's either a staple in the main or the side somewhere, but yeah, Bottomless, a card that is hated by Steve Silverman, not topping. I'm sure he would be really happy to see that people are not playing Bottomless Trap Hole as much now. All right, for the next deck in top 8, so this is interesting. This is a Diva Hero deck, and what I am noticing here is that there were a lot of hero decks in the top cut of this event. In fact, are they all different too? One is Evil Hero, one is Diva Hero, and one is Hero Beat. So there are 3 different kinds of hero decks, which clearly says that Stratos is broken. He's the common denominator in all of these decks. You got some playing Diva, some playing Ocean, some playing Alias Beatdown, but they all made it. They all got in. And that's pretty cool. Like, that is pretty cool. And also not really surprising. Again, Stratos is just insane. This is another deck using Soul Exchange in a main deck that is not a Monarch deck. And I can't tell you how much I love that, because Soul Exchange is very close to like mind control and brain control, but they're baby. Like, it's like a baby of them, because it clears the field for you, right? But you can attack. So in that way, it's like mind control. It clears the field for you, like how brain control usually does, because you're going to get rid of the monster with brain control every time, unless you're just playing weird or you're killing your opponent. But yeah, Soul Exchange, it deals with an opponent's monster, and there's not really many cards that counter it. And after Soul Exchange resolves, there's really nothing that they can do outside of maybe flip, mask, or restrict, or like, I don't know why they wouldn't just chain it at that point. But yeah, Soul Exchange is a card that clears monsters face up, face down, doesn't matter. And then you get to summon out a guy. And Soul Exchange Caius is almost the same as Brain Caius in the sense that it can break any board. Like if your opponent has a crazy board, Soul Exchange Caius will deal with so much of it. Granted, obviously, Brain Control Caius is strictly better, but Brain Control is, limited to one for a reason. Brain Control is the best card in the format for a reason. But yeah, Soul Exchange is like the baby of Mind Control and Brain Control in any deck that's playing like Caiuses and stuff. And I'm not surprised that people are, getting to the point where they're realizing that Soul Exchange doesn't need to be played in just Monarchs. The last time we saw Diva Hero top was at Deck Dev Status 3 by a True Hero, who was playing a much more aggressive version of the deck where Snowman Eater was not present at all. And neither was Cyber Dragon in the main. So this version is a bit different in the sense that I would say it sets monsters a little more with the Snowman Eaters, and they just kind of like wall up and provide water for you as well. I'm noticing there is no Sangan, which is a little surprising to me only because when you're playing Torrential Tribute, I think that Torrential Sangan goes really well together because it all in this deck it searches out whatever you're missing. So if you needed a water monster, it gets you Diva. If you needed a hero, it can get you Malicious or Infernal Prodigy, and that's pretty cool. Like I think that being able to search any of them with Sangan is a pretty big deal. But yeah, and also obviously I love Sangan and Caius together. But yeah, this deck opted for stuff like Alias and Cyber Dragon, things that are a little bit actually higher attack values there. And then triple Wing Blast. Triple Wing Blast. There's a Treeborn Frog and there's Malicious in this deck, and there's also Plague. So those are targets for that. And this deck does tend to end the game pretty quickly, I would say, when it draws a good hand. So you won't get to experience the negs or whatever of having triple Wing Blast in your deck, because I'm not a big fan of triple Wing Blast, but if you're just trying to kind of OTK your opponent or get the game over with fast, then you won't really draw that many of them, and you only really want to see one to go with your turn 1 Stratos. If you get your turn 1 Stratos, you do play E-Call, Rhoda, and Stratos, so you have 3 copies of Stratos, so you have a 40% chance of opening it in a 6-card hand, which is really nice. And yeah, having the Wing Blast to go with the Stratos Malicious play turn 1 is one of the strongest plays in the game. It is definitely up there with like Lone Fire into Titanial turn 1. It's really, really powerful. And then in the side deck, we have Sirocco's and Deck Devastation Viruses. Love that. Like Vanity's Fiend, love that as well. Soul Taker, another copy of Soul Exchange. Soul Release, 1 copy. If you're going to play Soul Release, just play 1, please. Definitely see the Bottomless Trap Holes like I talked about a second ago. Bottomless Trap Hole, if you're not going to main it, I think you sided for Black Wings. It's really good. In fact, every Summon Stopper is just good against Black Wings. So Trap Hole, Bottomless, Torrential, Solemn Judgment, all of those things that just stop their summon. Really, really good against that deck. So it's definitely one of the valuable side deck cards against it. But yeah, triple Deck Devi, man, this card, I'm seeing more and more people side straight up 3 copies of it just to absolutely blow out things like fairies and whatever puny decks there are that exist in Edison, like Quick Draw, for example. If you play against Quick Draw and you have triple Deck Devi, I don't even know what they're supposed to do at that point. It's such a ridiculous card against those decks. They play so many monsters that get hit by it. But other than that, I think the rest of this is the extra deck, everything you would expect. And the side deck is pretty cool with the Siroccos against Black Wings, with the Deck Devis, and against other matchups. I could see that totally coming in. But let's move on. Okay, next is James Ark, who made top 4. Now we're in top 4 with Christius Horn. And this looks like almost card for card what topped RBET Rulers. I think that there might be a change in the side deck. I don't recall Book of Moon being there. I think it was the 3rd Thunder King. But he decided to change a Thunder King for a Book of Moon, and I want to say that is literally the only change that I see. If I'm missing something, feel free to let me know. But as you guys know, I have been caping for this deck for weeks on my channel, if not months. I love Christie's one. I think it's actually an S tier deck. I think it's one of the absolute best decks in the entire format. I think that its top 4 showing at this tournament is kind of a testament to that as well. It is just a really, really strong deck, and I think that it replaces Lightsworn in the meta. I don't think there's any reason for you to play straight up Lightsworn. Like, I get it if you want to high roll and mill wolves. If milling wolves really gets you off like that, then play pure Lightsworn, because that's the only thing that it does that this deck doesn't do. Like, they both summon JD. They both summon JD quickly if they draw, recharges and charge. They both play Gold Sark and have to wait and stuff like that. But where this deck shines is that it has 5 Boss monsters in it with the 3 Christia edition, instead of just 2. So if your JDs get milled and all your beckonings or reincarnations or whatever the Lightsworn deck plays gets milled, you still have these other 3 boss monsters that are terrifying. Like Christie is more terrifying to me than JD. Like JD is ridiculous, don't get me wrong, but there are more answers to Judgment Dragon, I feel like, than there are to Christia, because Christia invalidates an entire portion of your deck, and depending on what deck you're playing, it's really bad. So I'll say that this deck stomps on frog decks like 0 difficulty. It is one of the best matchups this deck can have. This deck also stomps on zombies if they can't get set up and OTK you fast enough, and this deck can prevent it from OTKing you because of Herald of Orange Light, stopping things like Deep Sea Diva and Bryonic. Yeah, this deck is just really solid. It is really, really solid. And the hamsters and Raikos help it to wall up in the first couple turns. And then once it gets a graveyard, the beckonings are insane. Like this deck, when it flips beckoning, you think Lightsworn is scary when it flips beckoning. This deck is so scary because they can get back things like JD and Christia and manipulate the rest of their hand and grave so that they have exactly 4 fairies and exactly 4 names and all types of other nonsense. I'm sure if you watch some of my videos, you've seen me literally go JD Christia, or JD Christia, then normal summon something, and it's just like, what is happening? So yeah, this deck is really, really good. Really, really, really solid. I won't be surprised if this deck wins a tournament at some point this year. I don't think that the list really needs that much work, honestly. I think that it's very solid, and so did James, because he did not really change it. Next up, we have Ronak's deck. So I want to preface this entire discussion by giving Ronak his flowers, okay? I think that Ronak is by far the best Edison player. I think that it's just, the proof is in the pudding. Like, this guy tops so many events with all different kinds of frog decks, and that is extremely impressive. It is just impressive what he's able to pull off. This is a testament to not only his deck building prowess, but just overall skill level and understanding of meta and how metas shift. Because I think that there are a lot of important things to discuss about this list. But yeah, not even just this one particular top that just sets him apart. It's just his body of work in Edison is super impressive. Like, it is really, really impressive. And whoever has this guy on their team for the 3v3 coming up is a super favorite to win, I would say. He's absurd. Like, I rarely find players to be that impressive, but he is one of them. Like, he is just insane. So when I think about amazing deck builders, obviously I think about people like, Jeff Jones and Patrick Hoban and Sean McCabe. They've built actual meta defining decks. Like, they've changed the meta with their decks. They've done things, and this is not just in Edison, but throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's history, they were able to literally impact the way people deck build and shake up a meta completely and all types of stuff. And Ronak does that constantly, but with the same 10 cards in his deck. Like, the same, that top row right there, that exact top row, the 3 substitutes, 3 swap, 2 Treeborns, and 2 Dupe Frogs. That is in just about every one of his lists. And the other 30 cards are just whatever he feels like is good at the time. So the reason why I think that this is so brilliant is because a lot of people were talking about specifically Deck Devastation Virus leading up to this event. Because Deck Devastation Virus is seeing side deck play in triplicate. It really hurts the Hero Frog deck that plays Junk Synchrons and stuff, because they're just, outside of the 10 frogs that every frog deck is going to play, it hits all the Junk Synchrons, all the Infernal Prodigies, and just a ton of your engine, a ton of your cards. You often can lose your entire hand. Battle Fade is another one of them, right? If you're playing Tragodia, it hits that too. So this deck, game 1, we don't really care about deck dev because almost no one is maining Deck Devastation Virus yet. So you don't have to worry about how many monsters are small in the main deck. In the side deck, he sides in triple Sirocco and triple Vanity's Fiend. And I imagine that against something like Blackwing, if you think they're on deck devy, you can side out everything that's not a frog. So you can side out the little boost turbo Synchron dude and like Marshmallow and stuff like that. You can side those cards out that get hit by deck devy for 3 Sirocco, because Sirocco is just way better. Not only does it not get hit by deck devy, but it's an anti-Blackwing card to begin with. So you got your triple Sirocco there, and then you could go in with Vanity's Fiend, so I'm not sure if you actually did that. But I think even just taking out 3 of your small monsters for 3 Siroccos and making your deck only hit by Deck Devastation Virus on the actual Frog engine is really, really strong. So I would say that this deck is built with the idea of deck devy in mind from the gate. And then I always love side decks that side just 5 cards. There are only 5 cards in a side deck, and there's just 3 of each of them. I hate Twister. We talked about Twister. I don't think there's ever a reason to really play Twister. So seeing the 3 Dust Tornadoes makes sense. The 3 Book of Moons, that's also very, normal for Frog decks at this point. They need to out things like Fossil Dyna and Vanity's Fiends and Christia. It also gives you access to plays like bring back Treeborn Frog, Book of Moon your own Treeborn Frog, bring back a second Treeborn Frog, and then you can do stuff like that. He has creature swaps in his deck, so there's combos to be had. There's just a lot of cool things going on. And then 3DD Crow for your scary matchups like zombies. I actually imagine that against Vayu Turbo, you probably want DD Crow too, just judging by what I saw when he actually played out Top Cut. The aggression of just summoning 2300 vanillas can be problematic, even though he does play 3 Wabaku, 3 Threatening Roars. But yeah, this is still very, 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 very good, very strong. And I think that DD Crow is just a card that we're used to seeing in side decks. He didn't need the side Cyber Dragon, I guess. And that is basically because this deck probably just shits on the Machina deck. In fact, I'm willing to say that it does because of Lava Golem. So you have, instead of 2 Cyber Dragons, which essentially do a very similar thing, you have Lava Golem. So if your opponent ever summons Machina Fortress, and like usually they're going to have another monster on the field, you can just tribute both of them for Lava Golem. And that is ruinous. That is absolutely ruinous. Imagine your opponent discarding cards to summon Machina Fortress and then committing another monster to the field, like a Saturn Hamster or a Set Raiko or a Gearframe or, I don't know, a Card Trooper or something. And then you're just like, tribute both, summon Lava Golem to your field, and then do whatever. Like, I don't even care what you do after that. They just lost so much tempo and advantage, and they got this monster that's burning them, and if they attack with it, they might get Magic Cylindered, and you might take it next turn with Econ and Creature Swap and Brain Control and all this other nonsense. There's just a lot going on here. I really, really like this deck, but it's not even just this deck. I just love the way he builds and the way he thinks about Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm not even a big fan of discussing the technical play of the people in Top 8. Like, I watch the matches, and everyone who plays Yu-Gi-Oh! We can all improve on our technical play. But at the end of the day, the more we continue to play a format like Edison, the more deck building matters more than your technical play. I think that it's officially at the point where the decks are better than the players. And this is a concept that I was thinking about for honestly a couple months now. I think that Black Wings, for example, is the easiest one to kind of explain before. I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but I think the Black Wing deck is better than most people playing it. Because if you open up Whirlwind, right, it doesn't really matter how good you or your opponent is. You're probably going to win that game if it goes unchecked, no matter what, right? Like, it's just like an auto win card, unless your opponent gets rid of it very, very fast or an absolute disaster happens. But usually games with Whirlwind are non-games. And then other things like Dark Arm and Blizzard are just really powerful cards, like overpowerful cards. And they don't require much thought to use them correctly. Like, you just do exactly what your hand is telling you to do most of the time. And that will get you very, very far if you are a person in a room or in a tournament who happens to be drawing their Whirlwinds more often or their Blizzards and their Dark Arms more often. You're just going to do better than a lot of other people because your deck is more powerful. It's better than you. So yeah, I don't really think that the technical play matters as much. I know that a lot of people critique plays and stuff, but it's so much easier to critique plays when you're watching than when you're playing. So just keep that in mind. I critique people's plays too. I'm always helping out my pupil Stango and just my other friends. But it's very easy for me to do that when I am not the one actually playing in that match. So, and that goes to everybody. It's if you are shitting on somebody, say, oh, he misplayed, he could have won, or this and that and the third. It's very easy to do that from a position where your brain is not focused on every single turn of the game and all other things that come with actually applying your brain to a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! But anyways, shout out to Ronak. Congrats on top 4. He would have actually topped the, Deck Devastators 3 if it weren't for Deck Devastation Virus hitting him for like 9 cards or some crazy nonsense with a fairy frog deck, like a Christia fairy frog deck. I think he was 5-0 or something before taking his first loss. And then, things just spiraled out of control from there. Like, he got pretty unlucky, I would say. I honestly think that the reason why he didn't top Deck Devastators 3 was because of some unfortunate things happening, and I saw one of them blatantly happen on camera, which was so unreal. Literally had like +5 on his opponent, and then a Deck Devi plus Solemn, because the Solemn was needed. He had my body as a shield. The Solemn was needed in order to guarantee the Deck Devi go through, and that was the only thing that could have possibly lost him that game, and it took away all his cards, and he ended up losing. So, yeah, I think that he would have had another top with another version of a another version of a frog deck and a fairy deck that would have impressed everyone. And I saw that, and I do not forget things like that. So yeah, I love this guy. I love his deck building. I love the fact that he keeps doing it with all these different frog decks. And this burn version of frogs is just OP as hell. If you haven't seen it yet, watch his top 8 match. It was insane. Like, honestly, it was so good. The way, I don't even want to spoil it. If you haven't seen it, just watch it. There are so many cool things that happen, and you just won't see them coming, in my opinion. Especially watching it when you didn't know his deck list. Like, now we know his deck list, so maybe you could, predict more things, but at the time I had no idea certain cards were in his deck. And yeah. Okay. In second place, we have Spooner using Value Turbo. I do think it's kind of funny how this was a very diverse top 8 overall, even with the thing where heroes took up 3 spots, but they're all different. Evil, Hero B, and then Diva Hero. I think that's really cool too. But as diverse as this top 8 was, the top 4 of it was very S tier. If you've seen my tier list video, check that out. If you haven't, but if you see my tier list video, all decks in top 4, I consider them S tier. So Christius Warren is one of the top 4 decks. Frogs of honestly any kind of deck that's just playing 3 substitute, 3 swap frog, and that whole thing where you're able to go down like 10 cards. Any of those decks, they're all just S tier. Like, the frog engine is an S tier issue in Edison thing. It will never fall below that. Substitute is not a fair card. It just isn't printed fair. And I think Rodneck has shown us that over and over again. So you got Frogs, you got Christius Warren, you got Value Turbo, which I consider S tier, and it has won and done well at so many tournaments in the past. And I think that it's still a contender, even though a lot of people don't play it as much. I think that it's definitely lower representation for Value Turbo. So I would love to know just how many Value Turbo decks enter the tournament. I would actually love to know that data for all of the tournament, like how many Christius Warren decks were in the tournament, how many Light Warren decks were in the tournament, how many Glad Beasts, and etc., so that I can tell what the conversion rate is on these decks making it the top cut and how far they go and all that stuff. That would just be really good data to see. But yeah, Value Turbo is slept on. This deck is crazy. I was playtesting this deck with Vinny, the PS5 winner, and when we were playing, I was just like destroying him, honestly. And he was like, I'm not a fan of how these games are going. They were very quick. The deck just applies pressure very, very fast. You can't let a Greffer sit in the field. You just can't. It is way too much damage if Greffer gets to live. And I don't know why, it just feels so different from the Blackwing hybrid deck in that regard. Like, something about this version of the deck just has a speed to it that is terrifying. It deals damage very quickly. So your opening 6 need to be strong and defensive so that you can get to a mid to late game, because this deck is not trying to let you even get to the mid game. Like, fuck a end game. You're not getting to a mid game with this deck a lot of the time, and that is not okay. But yeah, this deck got second. So shout out to Spooner. Congrats to him. As far as the list goes, I see the return of Elf and the Raven. I don't imagine that that's necessary. Like, that could definitely be something else. That could be a second Armageddon Knight. It could be anything else. It doesn't need to be that. But I'm not exactly mad at it either. I've seen lists in the past play Elf and a Raven, and I understand the merits of playing that card. But I would say it's definitely the weakest card in the deck by far. I mean, it is kind of a brick a lot of the time, so there's that. Let's see. Double Book of Moon, standard, especially when you're playing triple Ryko, double Hamster, Burial, and what else is there? Is there anything else to really be said about this? I think this is a very standard Value Turbo list. Even the side deck is just all cards that you've seen before. It starts off with Cyber Dragon and DD Crows. Surprise, surprise. Mind Control, if you're playing a bunch of tuners, makes sense. You have Gale and Plague. But then even on top of that, you have the fact that mind controlling an opposing Hamster or Ryko is very, very good. So every time you play against a deck that plays Hamster, you decided mind control because you're also playing Hamster and Ryko. So you benefit from it as well. The one soul release, again, if you're playing soul release, just side one of it. Double deck Devi, Mind Crush, Pulling the Rug, Decree, Oppression, all of these. Yeah, everything here is solid. No complaints, no gripes or anything about this. Very few traps. This deck is trying to go fast, not slow. So yeah, I'm a fan. Also, when I think about this, a lot of the decks in the top 4 actually. So Christius Sworn only plays 3 traps. Ronak's deck plays like 7 or 8 traps, I think it was, and most of them are just like chainable Wabakus or Threatening Roars type of cards, and I think 1 Mare Force. But yeah, people are not playing, at least here, at least in this top 4, there aren't as many traps. Let's see what the first place deck looks like, though. Okay, in first place, we have Soul using zombies. This is kind of funny, the name's being Soul and using the zombie deck. It's very fitting. Yeah, so Soul went undefeated, did not lose at all, did not have a bracket reset. So no one took a set off of him using zombies. This is like the second time I've seen this in Edison format where zombies just steamroll the tournament. I think we saw this a while ago in the middle of last year, like RBET, maybe it was 2? Was it RBET 2? Where zombies won and just went undefeated as well. I have this deck as S tier. It's very, very strong. It can always just OTK you if you play it right, and it is kind of hard to play this deck correctly all the time. If you play it well, it does reward you for your technical play. This is one of the few decks where I feel like your technical play actually does really impact the outcome of the game, because you have so many decisions that actually do matter, and I don't think you have that many auto wins, if any at all, outside of maybe like, oh, I drew dark arm you. Yeah, and he's opted to not play Return from Different Dimension in the main deck, so that takes away one of the auto win cards in my head, and chose to put in Burial from a Different Dimension in the main deck. I don't know. That just seems so weird to me. Like, Return is actual game when you flip it. It is just GG, no re. Like, your opponent has left the duel. But yeah, anyway, everything else about this deck is what you'd expect from a zombie deck. I like the double main deck, DD Crow. I wonder, so we're getting to a point where maybe that is something that needs to be explored a little bit more, DD Crow, because it is good against every deck. When you really think about it, like, look at the whole top 8. Like, look at every single deck in this top 8. And tell me that there aren't choke points where all of them could just lose to a DD Crow or be really hurt by a DD Crow. In the main deck, like, game 1 DD Crow, every single deck. You activate Dark Call, you activate Miracle Fusion, you activate Hero Blast, you activate Lumina's Effect, or you beckoning, you're trying to correct your graveyard for 4 fairies, and now after you do that and it resolves, I go DD Crow, now you're at 3 fairies, and now you're fucking sitting there looking stupid. Yeah, DD Crow it's just really, really crazy sometimes. Even against Value Turbo, like, they're going for a push and you're just like crowed the value, and now you don't have anything going for yourself. You just have a 1700 Greffer who is, by the way, terrible on the field by himself. 1700 is not a lot of damage. 4000 is a lot. That 2300 that usually accompanies him, it matters a great deal. So yeah, I'm not too shocked that DD Crow in the main deck went really far. Nazar Sarhan, who is a really big advocate of DD Crow, I know he loves this card. He actually mains it in his zombie deck as well. So I'm wondering if Soul was inspired by that at all. But even if not, just knowing that DD Crow can go in the zombie deck and just disrupt people's plays and act as a really, really good hand trap, super, super good. Also, double Book of Life. So there's a lot of banishing your opponent's graveyard, which I think is super relevant the way the format is going. The format being so heavy on Christius Horn and Frog decks and decks that play value. Yeah, DD Crow stock is definitely up. As for the side deck, Triple Light Mirror, not trying to deal with the fairy deck at all. Double Cyber Dragon Standard, double Cross Out, double Compulse for the mirror match, and for decks that just go in the extra deck like Diva Hero. Starlight Road, which I imagine is for Black Wings and their Icarus attacks. My Body is a Shield and Lightning Vortex. This deck always sides Lightning Vortex, I think. Makes sense. You have things to discard that you want in the graveyard, and then you can Book a Life. So it sets up Book a Life immediately. You could, like, Lightning Vortex, discard Pyramid Turtle, and then just Book a Life because your opponent will have monsters in the grave now. That's a really cool interaction. Yeah, everything else about this deck I think is just fair. Double Destiny to open your opponent up. Mind Control, really good when you can search out your tuners, and you have, how many of them? 3 in this deck. He doesn't play Gale. I was looking for Gale. The 2 Diva, 1 Plague. Yeah, this list is just solid. It's just a solid zombie deck. And because Blackwing's no longer main oppression all the time, zombies have an easier chance. I think that there was a stretch, right? There was a long stretch after RBET 2 when zombies won, where the Blackwing decks were playing oppressions. And that card ruins this deck. Like, it really puts it in. So now that this, that's not really a thing anymore. Like, there isn't really that many oppression decks going around. Zombies just do really well in that environment. I am not shocked. They do really, really well in an environment without Oppression. It also is the reason why Diva Hero was able to do well, because Oppression hurts that deck a lot. It just hurts those two decks so much. I also think it hurts the Hero Frog decks because they play a lot of special summons and stuff like that. But yeah, if Oppression stock is down, then Diva Hero and Zombies and Christia Sworn can thrive. With that being said, RBET 1 Season 2 was a big success from what I could tell. Again, shout out to everyone who helped organize this event. Shout out to Keegan and E3 Yu-Gi-Oh! For putting this together and hosting this. Shout out to everyone who topped. And congrats to you for, again, shaking up the meta. I think that this tournament, just like the PS5 tournament, gave us some new ideas, some things that are going to be played on Dueling Book this week and probably for weeks to come until we get another big tournament. Maybe that 3v3 tournament, so definitely look into that. But that's all I really have. So I will catch you in the next one. Leave a comment, subscribe, like, all that good stuff. Help to get us to 1,000. I think we're over 700 right now. So if you like this type of content, if you like hearing my long discussions, then please subscribe. Once we get to 1,000, then I want to do a subathon type of thing, and that's something I've been wanting to do for a minute, but it makes more sense to do it when we get to a huge milestone, like 1,000. At that point, I think that we could do the YouTube partnership and all that stuff. So yeah. Anyways, I'm out of here. Catch you in the next one.